Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Weather Enterprise Leadership Teleconference. This conference is being recorded Thursday, December 13th, 2012. I would now like to turn the conference over to Dr. Tom Bogdan, President of UCAR. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone in the Eastern Time Zone, afternoon actually in the Eastern Time Zone, and good morning for the rest of us across the country. My name is Tom Bogdan. I'm the President of UCAR, and welcome to our telephone conversation on Weather Enterprise Leadership Teleconference. Joining me this morning and afternoon on this call are going to be Scott Rader, the Senior Advisor to me here at UCAR, John Snow, the Regents Professor of Meteorology at the University of Oklahoma, and Steve Root, the President and CEO of the Weather Bank Incorporated. We will talk and make a couple presentations and outline some of the aspects of the Weather Commission for about 20 or 30 minutes, and then we will have wide open chances for you to ask questions. So I'd like to turn it over now to Scott Rader.
All right. Thank you, Tom. And folks on the call, really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to take time to participate in this very important and critical call. I think everyone on the call is aware that back in September 27th, there was an event on the Hill that came on the heels of the Basque Report that addressed issues at the Weather Service and in the community. And at that event, Tom Bogdan and others called for the creation of a U.S. Commission on Weather Policy. The purpose of this call is to update this community on the activities that have happened to date since that event. And we've had quite a few. We want to talk a little bit about the feedback loops that we have created to engage the community, be as inclusive as possible, and bringing in all comments, and those are comments that are for and against the establishment of the commission. We are open to all that feedback, and for those of you who aren't aware, if you go to weathercoalition.org, you can see those comments during the context of this call and understand some of the feedback we've gotten from the community. And as always, we like more feedback. I also want to add that we want to talk about next steps. And next steps means possibly saying, there's other mechanisms or routes to do this. This is a mechanism that is worthy of community support. And deciding which way we go down that path means which way we as a community can communicate and communicate freely and openly about what are the pros, cons, and frankly the risks that are out there in regard to a U.S. Commission on Weather Policy. The other purpose of this call is to get feedback from you, and I want to emphasize that the agenda you've seen, there's a Q&A for 30 minutes. I want to emphasize that is your time to ask questions of the folks here today. I think that's extremely important, and have a nice discussion about kind of where we are as a community, why we might need this, why we may not need a weather commission. But this is open time for you, and I want to add that if 30 minutes is not sufficient, rest assured, Tom, John Snow, Steve Root, myself, and others will answer any questions after this call at any time. We really want this to move forward as inclusively as possible. One of the things that Tom and I have done is travel to Washington, D.C. on a number of occasions to talk with folks, particularly on the Hill, after the event we had on September 27th. And one of the things they really asked us to do is be as inclusive as possible and get feedback from every constituent group that is directly related to the weather enterprise. And that enterprise is inclusive of the academic sector, the private sector, and the public sector. So the broad scope and depth of our entire community is what we're trying to address here today. To that end, we look forward to the feedback that we get from here today. I think the Q&A should be a stimulating discussion for all of us, and realize none of us take this personally or whatnot. It's just a good open forum for us to provide feedback. To this end, let me hand the call over to John Snow, who's going to talk a little bit about the Weather Coalition position. John, it's all yours.
Actually, I thought, that's okay. Let's get my agenda right here. Good morning, colleagues. I'm John Snow. I chair the Weather Coalition, or co-chair the Weather Coalition, along with my co-chairs Ray Bann, formerly of the Weather Channel and now a private consultant, and Pam Imp, a senior engineer and scientist at Northrop Grumman in California. I'll make a few remarks about the Weather Coalition because many of you may not be familiar with it, and indicate its interest in the notion of a National Weather Commission, and then yield the microphone back to Tom. The Weather Coalition was organized about 10 years ago to carry out federal advocacy on behalf of the National Weather Enterprise. The coalition is very loosely organized, serving as a discussion, information sharing, facilitation, and coordination body among its members, as well as an advocate for issues of common interest. The coalition has as its primary purpose advocacy on behalf of operational meteorology, very broadly writ, and for research and development activities that enhance our nation's capabilities in operational meteorology. The coalition has taken a particular interest in our national environmental observing systems, as the data streams from such systems underpin almost everything we do in research and operational practice. In its federal advocacy efforts over the last decade, the coalition has attempted to educate members of our government on the importance of the National Weather Enterprise, as well as advocate for a number of specific programs, ranging from the National Science Foundation budget to support for the new INSEP building that just opened, to profilers and satellites. In these activities, the coalition has learned a number of lessons, which it believes are relevant to why we are here today. Specifically, our community is perceived as fragmented. Congress has used this time and again as an excuse for inaction, asking for our community-wide priorities, not just those of a particular segment. Secondly, there's very little understanding on the Hill and elsewhere in Washington what our enterprise is really about. The story of the congressman who said that we got all the weather information he needed from the Weather Channel and those satellites is apocryphal, but all too true. I've actually heard it said in that way more than once. There is little comprehension of the fact that our national weather enterprise is scattered across a wide range of federal agencies. Not only Department of Commerce that we know well, but Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Department of Interior, Department of Homeland Security, NASA, NSF, EPA, and various intelligence agencies that I will name, all play a role in the weather enterprise from a federal perspective. And this comes at a time when the environmental challenges we face demand a holistic systems approach to best serve the nation and obtain the maximum value for the taxpayer's dollar. Even less understood in D.C. is the fact that the National Weather Enterprise has a unique, vibrant private sector, which I suspect many of you are in, that provides a wide range of services to the commercial, agricultural, industrial, and financial entities that comprise our national economy, services that are critical to the success of these entities in the national and global marketplaces. Members of Congress and their staffs are often very surprised to learn that this private element is almost totally reliant on the environmental data streams and other services supplied by federal agencies. Let me conclude by indicating that the Weather Coalition is very interested in further developing the concept of a National Weather Commission. The Coalition does not see the proposed commission as a solution to near-term issues such as the so-called physical cliff or pending gap in important satellite observations, nor does the Weather Coalition see a conflict with important ongoing activities such as NOAA's Weather Ready Nation effort. Such efforts have a different scope and time frame than in what is expected of a national commission. In brief, the coalition sees the National Weather Commission as an opportunity to address longer-term systemic issues, such as the lack of true community priorities in research and services, the fractured nature of the federal effort on a large-scale operational computing support for both weather and climate services, and maintaining and enhancing a global ocean atmosphere observing system, to name just two, are critical items that should be addressed long-term. Our entire national weather enterprise is challenged to address such issues in a holistic way, especially in a time when it's likely that the federal discretionary budget, which funds many of these, faces a long downhill slide for the rest of the decade and perhaps well beyond, as the federal government wrestles with a huge deficit, growing entitlement programs, and ever more competing voices for the taxpayer's dollar. The Weather Coalition sees the National Weather Commission concept as our community's best option at the moment for obtaining an enterprise-wide strategic plan that will address how we optimally leverage current assets and move forward over the following decade. And now I'll turn it back to Tom Bogdan.
Thanks, John. What I'd like to address here is why a weather commission, why now? What's broken, what doesn't work? And I claim there are two key aspects about it. First of all is that we live in incredibly uncertain times. You're all following the negotiations between Speaker Boehner and President Obama as we face this fiscal cliff that lies ahead. The cliff leads to a different way of doing business in the future. We will be looking at more impacts, more severe scrutiny of discretionary funding. The times are changing, and we need to change with them if we are going to survive and prosper. We, the weather enterprise, have a great return on investment for this country. The issues around Hurricane Sandy are just the most recent thing to look at, where we understand how important what we do is for the economic health and also the national security of our nation. A commission is not to replace many of the wonderful vehicles that are out there for bringing together consensus activities separately within the public, private, and academic sectors. But what a commission offers is the possibility to get all three of these vibrant parts of our community together at one place, at one time, to make the decisions that need to be made for this country, to make the priorities that are necessary for our field, and most important, to understand how we partner together, each of us doing what we need to do to move the enterprise forward. If not now, when? The time is ripe, and the commission offers that capacity. We've talked about a commission simply because Congress and the administration understands the vehicle of a commission. In point, the Ocean Commission that ran from 2000 to 2004 was chartered by Congress, reported to the administration and Congress, and had a large impact on the ocean community. We do not believe that a weather commission should look like, talk like, act like an ocean commission. The times are different. The issues are different that we face, and the need for action in our community is, I think, more appropriate at the moment. But the vehicle, the concept of a commission that has the capacity for the administration and the Congress to have to heed, pay attention to, and address the recommendations is something that I think is sorely needed in our community. I'd give you an example. The supplemental for Hurricane Sandy that came out is $60.8 billion. The amount of money in that $60.8 billion that is going to the National Weather Service is $5 million. That is 1 part in 10 to the 4 for an event that was weather related. It says to me that the vehicles we have in place have not gotten our community to where they need to be on the national scene and in the importance of our Congress, our nation, and in fact the world. It's timely now because we really have issues that face us in the short term. If I look at the Ocean Commission, there were a number of aspects of the Ocean Commission that would probably not serve us well in a weather commission. It lasted for 4 years. I think we cannot at this time afford to wait for 4 years for our community to come together. It had other aspects about it that perhaps did not have the outcomes that the ocean community wanted. But what we're trying to do with this call, with the town hall meetings we're having, with the Weather Coalition Bulletin Board, is to bring together from the community a consensus of what are the issues that need to be addressed, what is the timely fashion in which it needs to be done. The history, as Scott mentioned, is that we rolled this out on the Hill on the 27th of September, not because we had something we wanted the Hill to do, not because we had a scheme or a plan in place, but because we needed to know whether Congress cared as much about our enterprise as we do. If this was a concept that was dead on arrival, so to speak, there would be no purpose for this call. There would be no purpose for the town hall meetings. But what we found on the Hill was an awareness of the economic imprint of weather and water activities for our nation. and a desire to ensure that we have that strength and capacity in the future that we have today. We do have much strength in our community today, but it's looking forward into the future. Can we maintain that in the face of the challenges that our country will face, and can we improve in those places where we need to improve, and what are our roles? We put on November 1st a weather blog coalition site out there where you could post any comments you want. It's at weathercoalition.org, and we thank the Weather Coalition for hosting that. There are a vast number of comments that are there. The capacity to put anonymous comments is there so our federal friends can be very clear and honest in their opinions on how important a commission might or might not be for them. And you will see a wide range of comments on that website, from positive to negative, as well as ideas of what a commission should and should not do in the future. I urge all of you to put your comments there. Do them anonymously if need be, but put those comments out, because that site is being read. It's being read by the Congress. It is being read by our community. It is being read by the administration. And here is where we can have a voice to speak for what we need to do. At the AGU last week in San Francisco, we held a town hall meeting that was very well attended, where we again described what a commission could do, why there seems to be a need for it now, and we took questions from the audience. One of the key questions, and one that I want to address straight up, is there risk in doing this? Yes, sure, you betcha. We have never worked in our community with a vehicle that has this magnitude of visibility and therefore the sort of momentum that a commission will bring. And that is absolutely clear, and we agree with that. I feel that to do nothing now on that score and hope for the best and hope that the vehicles we've used in the past will serve us well in the future is not an option that our community can countenance at this moment. We will also have a town hall meeting at the AMS coming up, and we will also continue to ensure that the website brings in comments. And this call is just the latest in our efforts to socialize this idea and put it out there for community input. To make the analogy, we're calling for a vehicle here, a vehicle that our community has not seen or used in the past, but one with great potential to take us to places that we've only dreamed of getting to. Indeed, there is danger in it going the wrong places, and that's why it's so important that you put your thoughts down as to where are the right places for us to go. This train has not left the station. There is no agenda right now of what a commission should do. That's why we're seeking your inputs. In fact, we don't even have a train. Whether we have a train or not depends on the Congress. It depends on the administration. But most important, it depends on you. Because without your inputs and without your comments, Congress and the administration will choose to do nothing. Operator, I think we are now ready for questions.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to register for a question, please press the 1 followed by the 4 on your telephone. You will hear a 3-tone prompt to acknowledge your request. If your question has been answered and you would like to withdraw your registration, please press the 1 followed by the 3. One moment, please, for the first question. Ladies and gentlemen, to register for a question, please press the 1 followed by the 4.
There's no question.
It'll be one moment for the first question. And our first question comes from Betsy Weatherhead. Please proceed with your question.
Tom, I'm wondering whether or not we can be confident that there is a common voice in our community. I think there are a lot of ideas. There's a general sentiment, well agreed, that we need to move our community forward, that we are absolutely critical to the nation. But there are many different views on what the sort of path forward should be. Do we need more measurements? Do we need improved models? Do we need more computing time? Does NOAA need to be bigger? Does NOAA need to be smaller? I feel like the Commission could have a tremendous say in this. How do we make sure that the Commission actually does speak for the community as opposed to speaking for some very small vested interests, for instance, self-serving interests of the commissioners?
Betsy, I think, of course, there is danger in where that train goes, and that's what you're pointing out, and I agree completely. I think the blog and the bulletin board is the best way to bring out those key points. I believe that there will be a preponderance of opinion behind certain key issues that will emerge from our community. There will be, of course, a vast array of inputs there that are all over the board, from very high level to very much deep and very targeted at specific activities. A commission needs to have a very broad view of what's going on because of the fact that it brings together public, private, and academic sectors. And so it should not be dealing with issues that affect only one of those sectors or some small part of those sectors. I think in the end, the Congress will look very carefully at what's there. It will work with the community in some fashion that hopefully they will let us know what that is if they wish to go forward, to ensure that we do look at that information and come out with the right direction. Again, what we're calling for here is that vehicle, and where it goes is obviously part of the outcome. But it's the vehicle first that I think we need to convince the Congress to go after.
Tom, this is John. I might add a comment to what you just said. I think part of the answer to Betsy's question lies in the I don't know if it's standard, but certainly a common structure to one of these commissions. There's often a group of high-level commissioners, typically 10 to 15 or so, which should be broadly representative of the community, but may actually be individuals from outside the community to give a fresh look. They are supported by a somewhat larger working group of technical experts that, again, should be selected from all across the community. And finally, there would be a terms of reference that would be part of the legislation establishing the community that would at least guide the initial work of the commission. The Weather Commission does provide, or the Ocean Commission does provide an example. They held a series of hearings all across the country, even here in the Midlands, the heartland of the nation, to talk about and get people's input on ocean-related matters. So I think there's a good chance that the Commission would certainly hear the broad spectrum of issues and concerns that are representative of our community, and also many of the users of the products and services of our community, and have the challenge of synthesizing those into very high-level recommendations. I sincerely doubt that the Commission would focus on fairly narrow or parochial interest, but really look ahead for where the community needs to make investments, what the role of the federal government is, as we move forward to, say, 2025.
Okay, got it.
And
I think we're ready for the next question.
Perfect. Our next question comes on to Peter Neely. Please proceed with your question.
Good afternoon, Peter Neely. Thank you for having this telecon today. I think it's very helpful. I think up to now we've been very careful about having the discussion with a complete clean slate of paper so as not to perhaps bias thinking or get group thinking in terms of what the Weather Commission is. But at the same time, I'm sensing that that's making it difficult to have sort of a gelled opinion from the community as to what we're really talking about. And I think it would be helpful to have at least a few straw men thrown out there as to here's what the commission, in terms of reference, could be looking at, or how it be structured and things of that sort. I think that would help on this discussion if we had a few straw men in that discussion. And more specifically, I think it was Tom who earlier in his remarks mentioned that we don't think the Weather Commission should, and I'll paraphrase because I don't remember your exact words, but shouldn't walk, talk, and look like the Ocean Commission.
Right.
That implies that you have some notion of what the Weather Commission should look like. And I wonder if you might share those with us as sort of a starting point towards my general comment.
Peter, that's a great question. We do not have a specific direction that we want the Weather Commission to go in at the moment. That is what the purpose of that bulletin website is to try to bring those thoughts together from the community. We do believe in a functional sense that the Weather Commission should not drag out for 4 years, that it should be focused on the things it needs to do, and it should not prevent the good activities that are currently going on in so many different ways from moving forward, like the Weather Ready Nation, for example. We need to start through the website to develop that framework of what are the key ideas that the community feels needs to be addressed and must be addressed with public, private, and academic partners at the table. Issues that span across that range of activities. And I think we need to get our stakeholders involved. We are seeing increasing interest in various types of weather, water products that are out there that really help the private sector to do what they need to do. So I believe that by harvesting the good things that will be coming from that website, we have the capacity to begin to narrow down and start to frame the direction that a commission could go in.
And our next question comes from the line of Daniel Banker. Please proceed with your question.
Yes, good morning. I believe you've enunciated very clearly and effectively what the benefits of a commission would be, and so I appreciate that. This has been very helpful for me. I would not want to interfere or disrupt anything that you would plan to do or try to do with respect to the weather, but I guess I had a question. Could you envision that space weather being a companion activity to this, or that by considering space weather together with weather, that this could be even more effective in mobilizing community and industry and governmental response?
Dan, my opinion on this is that the Commission needs to go into those areas of natural variability that have both an economic and a security aspect to them. That's really what counts here. And I would not want to limit it a priori to areas that are off limits or on limits, things of that nature. Indeed, it is possible that issues like space weather could come in, hydrology, various sorts of angles. In the end, it will be the Congress and the administration that will frame the scope of where a commission will go based on where they see the needs and where they see the stakeholder input.
Thank you.
And our next question comes from Cliff Mass. Please proceed with your question.
Thank you. You know, there have been a number of National Academy committees that have suggested the need for an advisory board or committee for the National Weather Service. So my question is, do you see the need remaining for such an advisory committee or board, or does this replace it?
Cliff, this is Scott Rader. Are you talking about a FACA committee that would come out of the Weather Commission? I just want to try and frame the question. Are you looking for in terms of a FACA committee that would do that? Or because the commission is a limited time body. So let me ask you that first before we respond.
Yeah, well, I think the answer is yes. I mean, there's an advisory committee now for NOAA, right, or advisory board of some sort. But there's been a number of National Academy committees, and I've been on some of them, that recommended that there's a permanent advisory committee or board for the National Weather Service. So do you still see the need for that, or does this somehow replace that?
Okay, so let me take this. Let me answer this because I'm pretty familiar with the FACAs inside NOAA.
Right.
So one of the FACAs that sits within the National Ocean Service is called the Hydrographic Services Review Panel. The role of that panel within the National Ocean Service is to be kind of a conduit where there's a flow and ebb between the private sector and the public sector over mapping techniques and hydrographic services. By law, under the Hydrographic Services Act, NOAA has to basically contract out 50% of all hydrographic surveys to the private sector. So the Hydrographic Services FACA serves as a really nice conduit to address some issues as technologies change, what the role of the private sector is. And I can certainly tell you that one of the things that they've looked at in the recent past is that due to constraints on federal funding, does the private sector have the resources to pick up and do more of that mapping? And in fact, they probably do. And that's important to NOAA program managers because what that means is rather than necessarily do hydrographic or bathymetric surveys, they're going to do fish surveys. And I don't want this to be a fish.
This is more general than that.
Okay.
And in fact, Ray Ban is maybe there. I mean, he was chairman of the committee that I was on, and the Academy Committee, and one of our recommendations was to establish some kind of permanent advisory board for the National Weather Service. Maybe Ray could speak more about that.
Well, let me come to a clip, which is the FACA to NOS and operations. You could have one to the Weather Service that does the same thing. I think it would be better if that FACA came out as a recommendation from a commission. That's what I wanted to get to. So that's why Hydrographic Services was set up, and potentially the commission could recommend this from a weather commission could recommend this to NOAA, and then NOAA would set it up. Let me stop there and let Ray speak.
Yeah. Scott, this is John.
Yep.
Let me just comment that I think I cannot see this commission functioning without it taking a close look at the various relationships between the three sectors, the academic community, the private sector, and the public sector, which goes well beyond NOAA and the Weather Service. And that relationship, as we well know, has improved in recent times, but still has some areas that often cause some friction. And coupled to that is the whole notion of, where the federal government is going to go given a reduced budget, particularly in these discretionary funds. So I think it's very possible that such an examination would lead to the fact that the weather-related organizations in the federal government, and again, I'm speaking across the board, not just picking on the Weather Service, need to listen to and be responsive to in different ways to the broader community.
Cliff, does that answer your question? Okay. We'll go to the next question.
And our next question comes from Jerry Dreyer. Please proceed with your question.
Yes, this is Jerry Dreyer with Sakura. I have a question. Have champions on the Hill been identified at this point? And if so, what is the strategy to expand that support, particularly in the current climate with regard to special interests? And the same could be asked about agency support.
So, Jerry, let me talk, first of all, after the September 27th event, we talked to staff in both the House and the Senate authorizers and appropriators, and I think that we are in a pretty good spot. I think we've talked to the House authorizers, and that's actually one of the reasons we are doing the blogs and the calls and the feedback. They really want to see where the community stands on this idea. They basically said, look, if you bring us a good idea, you're going to get support. We've talked to say we have people who could introduce this on the House side. We think it would come out of the House Science Committee as their type of bill. If you remember, this is bigger than NOAA. We've talked a bit about that. The reason that is significant is that any bill that comes out of the House is going to have sequential referral. It'll obviously have to go to Armed Services to take on the Air Force weather and the Navy oceanographic piece, as well as any other committees of jurisdiction. It was a stickier process. I worked this for Admiral Watkins on the Ocean Commission. It was a lot stickier on oceans because there's a lot more jurisdiction on oceans than there is in weather. So, in a way, it's cleaner to do from a legislative standpoint. We have talked to folks. We think we've got some champions. One of the nice things that I can tell you is Ed Perlmutter from out here wants to have a weather day on the Hill. So, on the Senate side, we've talked to a number of folks, both authorizing and appropriations. I think we're in a very good spot. They said the same thing to us, which is go out, let's see the feedback. Fiscal times are tight. What I can tell you in all the meetings that we've heard is that they really want us to say, let the community build us a charter through their comments. Let me turn over to Tom to talk about the agencies and where they are.
Yes. Out of courtesy, we have gone to the various agencies and are still in the process of going to all the complete lists that have inputs into the weather enterprise. And specifically, we've talked to people at NOAA, NASA, FEMA, DOE, and DOD to let them know about the rationale for this and why we see there are potential positives for our community in general. And since they are one of the three sectors that go in there, to date there have been no official positions that have come out from any of the agencies on this, and I believe it's something they're thinking about.
And as a reminder, to register for a question, please press the 1 followed by the 4. And our next question comes on of John Millay. Please proceed with your question.
Hi, colleagues. This is John Millay from Lockheed Martin and AMS past president. Scott's answer that he gave just a few moments ago actually went a long way towards answering what I was going to ask. But let me state it anyway. It was that I think many people, myself included, don't know the process through which a commission is created. And although we're not going to look like or act or be like the Ocean Commission in many ways, some description of the case study of how that came together, what was the process, or someone could draft perhaps a straw man process through which a commission is created, the steps that would have to happen. Once we build a commission, a consensus amongst the community that this is a good thing, and trust me, I think it's a very good thing, then this kind of a process cookbook would be very helpful. It might even be helpful for those who don't understand whether they should or not support this, because they would see what it is we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, John, I'm going to answer that, and I just want to let the operator know that Ray Ban would like to comment at some point. He's having trouble getting to the operator, so I want to make the operator aware. Okay, so, almost 14 years ago, I worked for this guy called Admiral Watkins, who was the leader over there in the Consortium for Oceanographic Research and Education. And the process was, John, that we worked the Hill and built the need, why we needed a Ocean Commission. And if you'll recall, that commission was actually the second Ocean Commission. The first was chaired by Julius Stratton in 1966 and resulted in the formation of NOAA and EPA. The process is such that we went out in the ocean community and got feedback from our members. And I can tell you that it was about establishing priorities, and we were having trouble in the ocean community establishing priorities. And Watkins got a number of the leaders from the academic sector, some private, but I would say more academic, but we brought in the National Ocean Industries Association and others. And the big push there was ocean observing. This is the push for the Ocean Observatory Initiative as well as the Integrated Ocean Observing Systems. So those were kind of the Hubble Space Telescopes of the oceanographic community. We worked the Hill and worked with staff, and it was funny. We worked with Margaret Spring, who's now the Principal Deputy Undersecretary at NOAA. She was working for Senator Hollings at the time. We actually hired Penny Dalton out of Hollings' staff, who wrote a lot of legislation. Penny is a wonderful legislative architect. She worked to draft this. We talked to the staff and members in the House, floated the idea, and our community essentially went up and had one voice in Washington, which was the Consortium for Oceanographic Research and Education, which is now Ocean Leadership. When the commission was established, it was established by an act called the Oceans Act of 2000. And one of the things I want to point out that's really clear is when the draft legislation went out, that legislation was shared within the community. So they could look at it and ensure that the charter was correct. that the process for selecting the 16 commissioners was correct. And I can talk to the details of that process if folks want to know. But basically, the House and Senate majority and minority leaders each get 4 and 2. You get 6 people out of each body and 4 from the president to get to 16. I think the other piece here is how do you get the commission funded? And the way that the commission was funded is there was an authorization in the Oceans Act of 2000 for NOAA at that point to provide money. And I believe it was about $2 to $2.5 million a year. And obviously, one of the nice things was that Senator Hollings at that point was both the chair of the Senate Commerce Committee as well as the chair of the subcommittee on appropriations that funded NOAA. So we did not have any problem getting the financial resources necessary for the Ocean Commission. It went fairly well. I think we're in a very good spot in terms of getting the feedback now from the community on the Weather Coalition website. We'd like more. I think what the Hill staff wants to do is when we get down the road and get to the establishment, get the community to say, yes, we need this bus, and then the next question is where do we want the bus to go, or the train, depending on your mode of transportation. We need to start putting that charter together. What would we want this commission to address? And remember, the Ocean Commission had a broad purview. I actually think one of the things that's interesting to our community, we're going to have a very broad purview as well. We're going to have folks who are going to be interested in the observing. We're going to have folks who are going to be interested in the modeling. There's the training and education piece. I think some of the comments on the website are intriguing to me about how people need to be able to take the forecast and take action. So there's a lot of pieces that could go into this charter, and then the commission would take these recommendations forward and address them through the town halls that they would have around the country. So it's I would say a year to 18-month process. But what I can tell you is, and I say this in an interesting way, whenever you have a weather disaster like Sandy, people get interested about, geez, what can we do? What can we do better? How do we do it? And I think that, I find 3 things in life are recession-proof: healthcare, crime, and weather. So I think we're in a recession-proof industry in the sense that the weather stuff on the Hill always resonates. It's always local, and all politics is local. So I think from a political perspective, too, we're in a real nice place on this. So that's the short line how we did the Oceans Act of 2000, and I agree with the comments. It's not the exact same thing for the weather community, but that was the process. And the legislative drafting piece would be something that we would ask the community to help. There are a lot of us who've got contacts in Washington to help, but we as a community would have to step forward and do this. Let me stop there.
Hey, Scott. And the entire call. This is Ray. I was finally able to get through on the speaker's line, so I apologize. In Washington now at the meeting of the Environmental Information Services Working Group, which is a working group to the NOAA Science Advisory Board, and we've got about a dozen or so people around the table here who are participating on the call. But I just didn't want to ignore Cliff's question earlier, so I apologize for taking so long. But I believe Cliff's question was relative to the establishment of a FACA committee specifically to the Weather Service. And Cliff had mentioned that I had the privilege of serving on a committee with him and others, an NRC committee, which was looking at effective communication of uncertainty in weather forecasts. And as part of that, we, as part of the recommendations, our committee reiterated the recommendation from the Fair Weather Report that there be an advisory body to the National Weather Service, and that the uncertainty area could be one of the potential topics that this advisory organ could address, amongst others. And the concept of a FACA to the Weather Service remains. It was contained in the latest NRC report, second to none. The Environmental Information Services Working Group that is meeting here today is actually a short-term implementation or an implementation of that concept, because the team, which focuses on all of NOAA's line offices, but has a focus particularly on the Weather Service, passes on recommendations to the Science Advisory Board, which is a FACA, and those recommendations are then submitted with approval of the SAB on to NOAA. And one of the more recent examples of that is the Open Weather and Climate Service Initiative that I think a lot of folks on the call are probably familiar with. So that is moving forward. How a commission relates to that, I think, is an interesting question, and perhaps something that would be a part of some of what a commission might consider as its terms of reference. But I think, as Tom has indicated, that is still to be determined. So those are my thoughts, and I just want to apologize again and wanted to make sure I responded to Cliff on that particular question. Thank you.
And our next question is a follow-up question from the line of Peter Neely. Please proceed with your question.
Oh, they have their number.
Yeah. That follow-up was actually for Ray Ban. Peter and Ray Ban are in the same room, so I think we can move on to another questioner. Okay, perfect.
And our next question comes from the line of John Madden. Please proceed with your question.
Yeah, this is John Madden. I'm on this call for two reasons. One, I'm the State Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the state of Alaska, and it's a very weather and climate-sensitive area. And second, I'm the President for the National Emergency Management Association for all the states and territories. And it's not a surprise that my profession is increasingly concerned about increasing uncertainty. The seasonality of the events is not as stable as it once was. The intensity, the timing, the concurrent aspects. So a lot of that uncertainty, we have been trying to work with whoever has information. And that's a tough thing when there are so many agencies and constituencies around that set procedures or processes or even set policies. My difficulty is that there's no means now to address a national doctrine on what to do with weather. What is the role of weather information? And Tom, I agree that this is public sector, private sector, and academia because all of them have some piece of this. And what I'm looking for and what the states are all looking for together, it's a way that we can get the science that helps decision-making so that we can take actions in the event and that we can set more comprehensive policies, like on land use or resilience or mitigation. And that's why I want to stay close to this discussion as probably one of the closest professions to what you're calling the weather enterprise or the weather community, because we find that there are many people who, like in 2011, there were 99 declared presidential disasters. The response that I was getting through several members of Congress was, there are too many disasters. Let's tighten up the rules so that we don't declare as many. That's not quite the science-informed position that we need to have for this kind of dialogue. So I'm in this for to find out a little bit more about how we can use something like a weather commission to elevate the discussion on doctrine, not just individual policies. And thanks,
Tom. This is John Snow. If I can respond.
Yeah.
Let me say that I think what you have raised is an example of exactly the sort of high-level question that a commission should undertake. And the way it might be phrased, I mean, this is one of the things we would have to someday work on, is the federal government, or maybe just make it more broader, is the weather enterprise optimally structured to meet the challenges of the future when there is a lot of evidence that the future is much less certain than what we have seen in the past? And I think that would be words to that effect would be a very good question to put to the Weather Commission as one of its charges.
I agree. And the variability, the extreme swings for me, bad flooding one year, nothing the next, and the drought, and the fire, then a flood. And for my profession, it gets rather biblical in proportion when we start to do our planning. How do we prepare for that variability? And there's no science to support our efforts in assessing risk and setting the priorities.
And when you look across, as you have clearly done, when you look across the federal government, it is moderately impressive of how many agencies have their finger in this area and have bits and pieces that are essential to addressing these questions in the future. But what is the right structure that we should have between the federal government, the academic community, and the private sector to pull all this together so that people like you can do your job?
Well, let me know if I can help frame that question. I'm great at questions.
That would be very good.
Help with the answers.
John, I think that you're spot on with your comment, and my particular personal hope is that the commission is made up of stakeholders like you and the fields that need a vibrant, successful, and absolutely competent weather service in the future, that your goals are the goals we need to get behind. So thank you for that comment.
Okay.
And our next question comes from Marshall Shepard. Please proceed with your question.
Thank you. Hi, this is Marshall Shepard from University of Georgia. I guess I also incoming president of the AMS, and I also serve on the NOAA FAB with Ray and colleagues, but I guess my question is not representing any of those hats, although you may see some relation to any of them. I guess one comment or question is I'm trying to get a sense for, and I think Scott Rader answered really part of the question, how you get to the commission, the structure of the commission in terms of who's nominated. Apparently there are 4 from the various components of government, House, Senate, and administration. I still have some curiosity based on others' experience how you get into that pool of the 4. Is it best connected? Who has the best lobbyists, et cetera? Because I am concerned that there would be somewhat of a stacking of the commission based on who in Congress or in the House is supporting this initiative most, and so there may be very specific issues. So that's a question I'd like to hear addressed. Another comment is I'm curious about what the leaders of this organization see in terms of the role of organizations like the AMS or AGU or NWA. AMS, for example, has the Weather Climate Enterprise, which is addressing some of these issues from a different perspective, and I think that there's broad support, but I think there are questions about what the role of these existing formats and structures would be. I think I'll stop there because the other question I had really was addressed by Scott earlier. So I'm generally supportive of this idea. I'm glad that we're having this conversation. It sounds promising, but I think I have some questions that I need to clear in my mind.
Okay. Marshall, this is Scott. So let me talk about the commissioner's process because I was intimately involved in that. So the way the Ocean Commission did it, and we don't necessarily have to do it this way, but there's different methods, but it was pretty effective. When the Oceans Act of 2000 passed, there was a call for 16 commissioners. The sitting president gets to appoint 4 commissioners. The House Majority Leader, the Speaker of the House, that'd be Boehner, would get 4 people. The Minority Leader, Pelosi, would get 2. And the Senate, Harry Reid would get 4, and Mitch McConnell would get 2. So when you ask the question, is it the best connected? I can tell you from my experience with that commission, various communities sent forward names of people they thought, broad lists of names of people that they thought would be good commissioners. So I know that when I was at CORE, when Lautenbacher came in and Watkins had essentially exited, obviously we included Watkins' name in that list. But I want to tell you an interesting story. Watkins was not nominated to the Ocean Commission by Fritz Hollings, who was kind of the godfather of oceans in the Senate along with Ted Stevens. He was actually nominated by Sherry Boehlert out of the House Science Committee at that time. And the reason that occurred is because the Republicans had control of the Senate, and that meant the minority leader in the Senate at that time, Tom Daschle, only had 2 choices. And so Hollings picked Paul Sandifer, a very distinguished ecologist from South Carolina, who's now one of the chief scientists in the National Ocean Service, and no, as his choice. And Hollings actually called Watkins and said, look, I need to push a person from my state who I think is really going to bring some scientific credibility. I know other people will nominate you, and you have Republican credentials, Admiral Watkins. There's no reason why you won't get it. So we worked that process. But other community organizations sent in letters saying they didn't send in letters specifically who to pick, but they actually sent in broad lists of names, and they were balanced. Ed Rasmussen from Alaska, former chairman of the Bank of Alaska, was one of the names that Senator Stevens sent in, ultimately got on. Now, interesting perspective to have a banker on an ocean commission, but this is a guy who had underwritten a lot of the finances for stuff in Prudhoe Bay. So there's a process there where the community will have to come forward, and I think AMS, NWA, the various associations, for John Madden, I would love to hear the National Emergency Management Association send forward a list of 10 names that they think should be on this commission. So these communities can send in a list of names, and then leadership in both the House and the Senate will sit down. I am sure that they will turn to organizations like AMS to say, look, these are the suggestions we have. Based on what you know, is that something that we should, address? And so I think that's part of that process in terms of the commission. I want to bring up another issue that's important too, and it comes to AMS and the regional meetings that the ocean community had as part of the Ocean Commission. Different organizations in the states related to ocean supported the regional meetings. Well, the wonderful thing about AMS, you're a national organization. I would anticipate, if such a commission is to be formed, that the local and regional chapters of AMS, along with universities and industry partners in those states, would essentially form groups in these states so that when the enacted weather commission comes to pay a visit, they help set up the site, they make sure we have the right speakers, they can address local weather problems and needs. So I want to make sure I add that. That was a really important component of the Ocean Commission because what it did is it drove, particularly between 2001 and 2003, in some cases it drove some parties in that community who rarely communicated, like the ecologists in the Gulf of Mexico with BP, for instance. I mean, they really didn't talk all that much, but the beautiful thing was a lot of the connections that were made resulted in better policy and communities who sometimes were at odds with each other, understanding each other a lot better. And that was a tangential benefit that nobody saw from the Ocean Commission regional meetings. They were very important. I want to add quickly on John Snow's comment. The Ocean Commission did a briefing in Iowa on El Nino, and that was a great meeting to have all these farmers come in and talk about why the ENSO cycle and knowledge of it was important to them for agricultural production. They made a link between a shift in the climate regime out in the Pacific to their crops, and that really resonated. And that was also important because there are a number of appropriators from Iowa who had no idea that oceans had a role or could touch people in Iowa. So it was a nice effect. Let me stop there, Marshall. Does that answer where you're coming from?
Yeah, that actually gets at that question quite nicely. And I guess my other comment was sort of the existing activities in the weather climate enterprise that I guess right now Matt Parker is involved with, and sort of some of the perspective there because the way EMS and other organizations, particularly EMS is the one I know about the most, it really is structured in a manner to try to think about things from the perspective of the public, private, and academic sectors in the same manner that I think this weather commission is correctly doing as well.
Marshall, absolutely. We've been in contact with the AMS, the NWA, and various groups. We very much welcome their inputs and leadership in this process.
Thank you.
And Dr. Bogdan, there are no further questions at this time.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate all the wonderful questions and staying with us. I'd like to call on Steve Root, President and CEO of Weather Bank Incorporated, to give us some closing thoughts on the discussion. Steve?
Thank you. Just when we think we've got everything answered and things are moving smoothly, we are facing another Rubik's Cube of challenges and opportunities. I want to thank all the attendees for participating on the call today. The level of your support, I think, speaks highly to the point that if we are to move forward with the U.S. Weather Commission, we must perform at the highest level to make sure that such a commission is inclusive of the entire weather enterprise. We face challenges now that, frankly, cannot be ignored. Here in the United States, we have an opportunity to create what I personally believe, I'm sure others do too, is the best weather prediction system in the world. We have an extensive research community, perhaps the best in the world. And from the point point of view of the private sector, we have the expertise and the talent and the experience and the desire to underscore a viable weather enterprise. During the past 10 to 12 years, the American weather enterprise and its participants have achieved, frankly, a level of mutual understanding and support of each other, and the ability to achieve and create and work together for the protection of life and property unlike any time that we've ever seen. And this level of cooperation and mutual support must be maintained. These success stories can be leveraged for the overall benefit of the American weather enterprise. To that end, I'd like to suggest that we keep in mind three things. First of all, there will be at AMS an opportunity to continue this discussion further, and I believe that's going to be held on Monday, January 7th. It starts at noon. I would encourage all of us to participate in that event. Secondly, as a reminder, there is a website that we can all go to review comments and discussions. It's at www.weathercoalition.org. Thirdly and lastly, there is in the planning stages today an opportunity to meet in Dallas March 6th and 7th. That will be an opportunity for a quick in, quick out, 24-hour meeting of leaders to meet, roll up our sleeves, and say, what are we facing here? What are the challenges? Where do we have to go? If we continue this idea of a weather commission further, what steps must be taken? And I think that would be a great opportunity for all of us to meet and solidify those discussions that we advance at AMS and continue this further. I wish all of you a happy holidays and thank you for participating on today's call.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the conference call for today. We thank you for your participation and ask that you please disconnect your lines. Have a great day, everybody.